Venomous Stare back with another Venomous classic, which if you don't know is a throwback StarCraft 2 series where I take a look at classic series played by some of the game's best players, and oftentimes these players have retired and gone on to do something else bigger and better than StarCraft. And in this case, we have the MLG DC Finals in 2010. Select is the Terran here in the bottom playing the red color, and Greg IdrA Fields is the top player of Lost Temple. And if you don't know what Lost Temple is, it is sort of this very popular map that a lot of people played. It was actually pretty bad for Zerg because it had a huge cliff right on top of the natural expansion, and you could drop Thors or tanks right on top of the cliff, and it was very difficult for Zerg to deal with. Back in the day, 2010, right when the game came out, just because this map was big, it was actually considered an okay map, and because this map was a Brood War crossover, this map was sort of falsely propped up as somewhat of a balanced map, but considering the fact that you could go for a tank or Thor drop on the high ground that Zerg was not really able to deal with, it was actually very Terran favored. And we can see here that IdrA has an Overlord in the front of his natural expansion going to check for bunker rushes. And if you don't know who IdrA is, I don't know where you've been or how you found this video. Greg IdrA Fields was one of the best American players to have ever touched the game. Nicknamed the Macro Machine, he played Terran in Brood War, traveled out to South Korea to try to become one of the best players ever, and actually lasted in CJ Entus, one of the top tier Korean teams, for a very long time. Until StarCraft 2 rolled around, he left CJ, joined Evil Geniuses, an American team, and went from there as one of the best players in Wings of Liberty to touch the game. Of course, being nicknamed the Macro Machine, he's known for his macro and his solid play, and it looks as though Select is going to opt for a reactored Hellion build here, as there were no Cyclones back in this day, and Select is a Korean-American player who is very talented. He's one of these Terran players who could not only do aggressive builds, cheesy builds, but he could also do macro builds. He wasn't one of these guys who was so stylistically set on one way or the other that he was very predictable. No, that's not the case. Select could both micro and macro. He was a player who exhibited a lot of strategic diversity. But on this map, you didn't see a whole lot of strategic diversity. There's a massive cliff overlooking your natural, and that often meant that Terran players would drop siege tanks or Thors on the top of the cliff here and devastate their Zerg opponent. Now there is something very interesting that you have to sort of take a step back and examine the core principles of RTS to understand. Now Thor drop and tank drop was exceptionally powerful and was nearly impossible for Zerg to stop back in this day. However, because that was the case, we very frequently saw the fact that Terran players could sort of go for something different and surprise the Zerg. Now back in this time, Overlords were much slower. Overlord's speed was tech locked behind layer tech, so you had to tech all the way up to layer before you could even get Overlord speed, which of course meant that you couldn't even achieve the upgrade before you were attacked or the tech was revealed. As we see an armory going down here, and this was not for Hellbats, this was actually for a Thor. Back in the day, Hellbats didn't exist, it was straight Hellion, but you of course have to have an armory to make a Thor. Now it's interesting here that Select went for 4 Hellions and a Medevac. Hellions of course are sort of this bread and butter unit against Zerg, despite the fact that the game has been out for, 8 years now. Hellions are still very commonly used against Zerg, and with an extremely large main base here, we can see a Hellion drop going on. Select is going to try to kill drones here, but his Hellions get trapped, and we can see without the Medevac boost, Select is actually going to lose 2 Hellions here. So it goes for sort of a tricky play opening with Hellions on a map where you would expect a Thor drop or a tank drop to be rushed. He actually went for a quick Hellions, but then went for a drop. So it's one of these things where you show your opponent something they don't expect and then go into another build that is not only sort of what they already expect, but already complements what you were doing. Select, of course, is making another medevac and an expansion. So I'd like to jump back to the point where Zergs were not actually able to scout as well without the Overlord speed upgrade. This meant that whenever Terran players were choosing their early game builds, it was extremely hard for Zerg to figure out what were going on, and one of the strongest points for Terran was actually their ability to hide their technology and even potentially Marine Rush, as a Thor drop is starting to commence here. Now it is worth noting that the Thor just decimates Queens, and IdrA is making mutas here, so he might actually be able to pump out mutas just in time for that Thor drop. Notice IdrA is moving Overlords up onto the cliff of the natural. Now this is really how many of these games sort of came down for the Terran player, as Select is about to drop on top of the cliff of Greg IdrA Fields right over his natural, right as IdrA's mutas are about to pop. And if the Thor and Marines survive, that's so bad for IdrA. He's going to rush onto this weak medevac, and he kills it. Only 5 out of the 8 Marines are able to be dropped. He's going to move the Spine Crawler into range. Now it is worth noting that Thors just eviscerate Queens. They do so much damage to Queens, and the Spine Crawler took so much damage to Burrow that it just dies. And Zergling drop from the Overlord was highly limited, being again limited to Lair Tech, not Evo Chamber Tech. IdrA's going to run in with the Queens and the mutas here. He's going to Magic Box over the Thor. Select a little bit slow to micro his Thor as he's being ravaged at home by Lings. IdrA kills the Thor, kills the medevac, and we see a brilliant defense from Greg IdrA Fields, who is up by over 30 supply. And this is something that you saw very frequently, is that if Zerg was going to hold, it was going to be by just a little bit, a very razor's edge type hold. And now IdrA suddenly has a huge advantage as he's attacking Select with a Mutalisk army, and Select just GG's right out of here. And we're going to go to the second game of the series. And IdrA's a little bit surprised there, and it's going to be on Xel'Naga Caverns. So now that we have a map on Xel'Naga Caverns, as we see Select is complaining a little bit about, oh no, I wish I had someone to practice with that played Zerg, and IdrA says other players are smart, they don't play Zerg. IdrA, of course, known for his wit, Select laughing. And if you don't know, back in this time, IdrA was competing in the GSL, the best Korean tournament, so he was playing on the Korean server. And it was sort of this famous thing where there weren't a lot of good Zerg players on the American server. Back in this time, it was very hard to play Zerg. You had maps like Steps of War and Lost Temple and Kulos Ravine plaguing the map pool. So there were a ton of Terran players who very frequently would do these aggressive builds against Zerg, and the Zerg player would just sort of roll over. Excuse me. But we can see IdrA, after months and months of playing on the Korean server and playing in GSL, he's very adept at dealing with these aggressive, obnoxious pushes. And with Select going for that Thor drop and IdrA getting mutas out just in time, it turned out that the Marine Thor drop of Select was not enough to break the natural of IdrA. And very frequently we would see games where the Zerg player would sort of try to go for roaches, or he would just try to make a bunch of spines, and the Thor or the tank would drop up on the high ground, and suddenly the Zerg player doesn't have any options, he's just dead. But IdrA got mutas out just in time to deal with that, just in the nick of time. And Select died a cruel death in this best of 3. Now we have a map, Xel'Naga Caverns, which is known for Hellions and known for harassment play because it is so open. And Select, of course, is going to go for the reactor again, probably going to opt for Hellions again. And it's very interesting to me that Select didn't rush for Hellions, or excuse me, he didn't rush for a Thor. he actually rushed for Hellions on Lost Temple. Very frequently on that map we see a very quick rush up to Thor or up to tank, with a 4 Marine, 1 tank drop being employed, and Select sort of went for this more conservative build where he went for Hellions. He sort of scared IdrA in the early game, and then scared him again with the Hellion drop, and then he went for the Hellion drop, which IdrA defended with the minimal amount of units. Defending with the minimal amount of units is always very important as Zerg. You don't want to sit there and overmake attacking units in lieu of drones, because as everyone knows, the drone is the bread and butter unit of Zerg, and overmaking attacking units prevents you from making drones. So we can see here that Select is going for the Hellion play again. IdrA is going for a fast spine crawler on the left side of his natural hatchery. This is a very intelligent move, and Select will probably just make 2 more Hellions. There they are, and oddly he's going to range out with the initial couple Hellions. Now for many Zerg players, this would be a very surprising moment, very awkward moment that hits right before they have Ling speed, and the Hellions would kill a few drones, and the drones would be very badly needed, and then the Zerg player would be behind, and the follow-up attack would hit extra hard because the Zerg player would be resistant to making attacking units. And with 4 Hellions coming out, it looks like Select is going to do a swap. 2 spines out. IdrA knows this is a very open map where players love to opt for Hellion play, but it looks like Select is going to go for a medevac and a couple Marines, and he's just going to keep pressing with the Hellions. Now something we saw a lot is Terran players would just sort of do the screw it, I'm just going to move all my Hellions into the main mode, but with speedlings out, a little bit of creep spread, and a queen, Select is not going to do that. And a medevac is out for Select. I wonder if he was playing conservative because he intends to drop these Hellions. We will see. And it looks like he's going for the same build as last time. A little bit of a Hellion drop. Lair just now finishing for IdrA. IdrA knows what's up. He's moving 2 queens into the main. Has Overlord spewing creep on the corners of his base. And Select might actually mosey onto the backdoor bushes directly behind the natural of IdrA and just drop a couple Hellions off there and try to run in. But with the spine there, it will be a little bit more difficult than usual. He had made a Viking that's very smart, as IdrA's going for Spire, and IdrA was just now moving that spine, but it looks like Select's going to be surrounded, and without medevac speed, Terran players were no longer able to drop with impunity, and Select was only able to recover 1 puny Hellion. With the Spire going up, IdrA will continue to defend. With Queen and Ling, the natural for Select is just now finished, but Select went for a very tech-heavy build, and it looks as though his next drop is going to be repelled. The Viking is an extremely strong move, but it got an Overlord and sort of was not able to find anything else because IdrA retreated everything, and suddenly we see the American Macro Zerg has defended. And the Hellion drop was propelled. Select is just going to keep trying to do damage with this with this Viking. And he's going to be pumping tanks. He has a bunker out, of course, filled with Marines. And he has opted to try to seal up that backdoor rocks. Select is playing pretty well, but he was really relying on those Hellions to do damage. Granted, he only made 4, which sort of hurt him, because IdrA didn't go for Roach. Select has gone for Hellion drop both games. And mutas are out for IdrA. He's getting +1. More mutas on the way. And this is something that you see a lot, where the Terran player sort of opens with harassment in the early game, but hide-ho, here comes the Zerg player pressing forward with mutas, because it is sort of a power trough for the Terran for them to open with a tech build and then get into this position where, oh crap, he has mutas and I don't have a lot of stuff. But Select, thankfully, does manage to get up a turret. And Select does have tanks out by a bunker, so IdrA's going to be hard pressed to kill these tanks off. And IdrA just wants to look for positions where he can do damage and not take any damage to his mutas. And with 3 tanks going out here as well as Marines, Select is getting his depots attacked. IdrA gets the depots burning, and as soon as the depots are lowered and the AI normalizes, Select tries to heal those depots and defend them. IdrA has not taken a 3rd base yet. He is doing some heavy mutalist harassment here. Some nice creep spread going, and it looks like he will take his 3rd base pretty soon. And back in this day, the green tech lab whirled up anytime you were making a unit, not just when you were researching. And IdrA does have +1. He's going to poke and prod and try to find a weak point of the Terran, and notice that he just gets the buildings burning before leaving, and the buildings of course will burn down and explode before Select has a chance to repair them. A depot going down there for Select. Baneling speed on the way for IdrA, who has taken the 3rd, and we can see he's doing the incredibly intelligent thing of continuously poking and prodding at the back door of his opponent. He knows that there are turrets in the main location, so he doesn't want to force the issue over a turreted area, but he will pick off the weak spots. And 4 tanks are out for Select, so he's badly trying to stabilize here. He does have a strong army against ground, but IdrA just needs to keep finding the weak spots. As it is very late when I'm making this video, I am pretty tired. And a reactor is sniped there from IdrA, great move. As anytime you can snipe add-ons of Terran, it's a big pain in the ass, because not only does it cut into their production by limiting what they can make or how much they can make, but very frequently Terran players will just have to remake the add-on, and that will put them in a precarious position. Ling Bane is out here for IdrA. He's going to attack on creep. Select does not have the time to split. The Banes are on top of him. He's going to try to split his army off here, but notice that the infantry is being chased down by Marines, while the rest of the army was butchered by mutas. And IdrA kills almost all of the ground army here, and he finishes off the tanks with mutas. As that push did not go well at all for Select. He didn't have medevacs out. He was just trying to do a marine tank push, something that was very common back in the day. He has a handful of units out, but IdrA has breached his man and says GG, congrats. So IdrA is going to win MLG DC here, playing on 2 maps that were considered pretty bad for Zerg. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you rate the video. The link of this video, as far as the source goes, will be in the description.